The first to arrive were the Veltar, the race that could make their ships invisible. They had been hiding in the outer system, watching the battle. When they saw the humans fighting impossible odds, they remembered what courage looked like. Their ships flickered into view behind the Zephyrian formation and began attacking. Next came the Mordun with their incredible shield technology. Their ships glowed with energy barriers that could stop any weapon. They had been enslaved for 300 years, but they still remembered freedom. The Krixana arrived with weapons that could crack planets. The Thelnari brought their speed drives that could make ships move like lightning. Race after race appeared at the edge of the battle, all drawn by the sight of humans willing to die for strangers. Commander Veldthok stared at his tactical display. In horror, his perfect battle against 50 human ships had turned into a galactic rebellion. Over 200 alien vessels now surrounded his fleet. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "These races have been conquered. They should be afraid." His tactical officer was young and had never seen anything like this. "Sir, we are getting reports from across the Empire. Conquered worlds are rising up. They are saying that if humans can fight the Empire, so can they." Admiral Cross watched the alien ships take position around the battlefield. She opened a communication channel to all of them. "This is Admiral Helen Cross of the human fleet," she said. "Thank you for coming, but I want you to know what you are risking. If we lose this battle, the Empire will punish your worlds terribly." Elder Velthana's voice came over the channel from one of the Cathara ships. "Admiral, we have been punished for centuries just for existing. Today we choose to fight back." A new voice joined the conversation. It was deep and proud. "I am Captain Zarkul of the Veltar Rebellion Fleet. My people have lived in the shadows for too long. Today we fight in the light." More voices joined in. Dozens of species that had been crushed under the Empire's boot for hundreds of years. All of them inspired by the sight of 50 human ships challenging an empire. But the Zephyrians were not finished. Commander Velthok had called for reinforcements from across the Empire. New ships were arriving every hour. The rebellion fleet was growing, but so was the Imperial force. "All ships," Admiral Cross said over the communication system. "The enemy is getting stronger, but so are we. Commander Clark, take a strike team and capture their flagship. If we can take their leader prisoner, the rest might surrender." Clark nodded from her position on a fast attack ship. The biotechnology in her armor had continued to adapt during the space battle. She was now faster and stronger than any normal human. "Admiral, I am reading massive energy buildup in the Zephyrian flagship," Dr. Parker reported from Morrison's ship. "They are preparing some kind of superweapon." Cross looked at her tactical display. The Zephyrian flagship was charging a weapon that could destroy entire fleets with one shot. If they fired it, the rebellion would be over before it really began. "All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship," Cross ordered. "Stop them before they can fire that weapon." The combined fleet turned all their weapons on the massive Zephyrian ship. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles struck its hull, but the ship's shields were too strong. The attacks barely scratched it. "It is no use," Captain Zarkul said over the communication system. "Their shields are too powerful. We cannot break through." Clark's voice came over the channel. "Admiral, I have an idea. The biotechnology can adapt to anything, right? What if we let them shoot us with their super weapon?" "Clark, that weapon will destroy your entire ship," Cross said. "Not if the biotechnology adapts fast enough," Clark replied. "And if it works, we will have a weapon that can punch through their shields." It was incredibly dangerous. If the biotechnology could not adapt fast enough, Clark and her entire crew would die, but it might be their only chance. "Do it," Cross said. Clark's ship flew straight at the Zephyrian flagship as the superweapon finished charging. The massive ship fired, sending a beam of pure energy that could melt mountains. It hit Clark's ship dead center. For a moment, everyone thought she was dead. The energy beam was so bright it blinded their sensors, but when the light faded, Clark's ship was still there. The biotechnology had absorbed the superweapon's energy and was now glowing with the same power. Now that was interesting, Clark said calmly. All ships, stand back. I am going to return their gift. Her ship fired the absorbed energy back at the Zephyrian flagship. The beam punched through their shields like they were made of paper. The massive ship's hull cracked, and atmosphere began pouring out. Commander Velthok stared at the damage in shock. Impossible. Our shields have never been broken. Surrender now, Admiral Cross said over the communication channel. Your superweapon has been turned against you. Your shields are down. End this before more people die. Velthok looked around. His bridge. His ship was dying around him. His crew was afraid. For the first time in his life, he was facing an enemy that would not give up. But he was Zephyrian. He had been taught that weakness was death, and surrender was the greatest weakness of all. Never, he snarled. The Empire will never surrender to primitives. He reached for the self-destruct button, planning to take as many enemies with him as possible. But his hand never reached it. Half of his own crew stopped him. General, enough, his tactical officer said. Look around you. Half the galaxy is in rebellion. Our people are dying for nothing. Maybe it is time to try something different. Velthok looked at his bridge crew. These were Zephyrians who had served the Empire their entire lives. But now they were questioning everything they had been taught. What are you saying? Velthok demanded. I am saying that maybe the humans are right, the tactical officer replied. Maybe strength should protect the weak instead of destroying them. Across the battlefield, other Zephyrian ships were having the same conversation. They had seen their superweapon turned against them. They had watched conquered races fight back with courage they thought was impossible. Some of the Zephyrian captains were beginning to wonder if the Empire was worth dying for. One by one, Zephyrian ships began to surrender. Not all of them, but enough. The rebellion fleet accepted their surrender and offered them a choice. Join the fight for freedom, or be treated as prisoners with honor. Many chose to join. They brought with them detailed knowledge of Empire defenses and the locations of worlds ready to rebel. 6 months later, the Galactic Liberation Alliance met for the first time on the rebuilt world of Cathara. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in a great hall made of living coral that grew toward the sky. Admiral Cross stood at the podium wearing the uniform of the Alliance fleet. Behind her sat beings from across the galaxy, all united by their belief in freedom. 6 months ago, Cross began, a small exploration ship received a distress call from this world. Captain Morrison could have ignored it. Earth could have refused to help. It would have been safer. It would have been easier. But that is not who we are. She looked out at the audience, seeing faces of every shape and color imaginable. The Zephyrian Empire ruled through fear for 1,000 years. They taught the galaxy that might makes right, that the strong should dominate the weak. Today we say they were wrong. President Turner stood up from the human delegation. The alliance will be built on different principles. Strength protects the weak. Diversity creates innovation. No species has the right to dominate another. These are not just human values. They are the values of everyone who believes in freedom. Elder Velthana spoke for the Cathara. When we first called for help, we never dreamed it would lead to this. One act of courage has freed half the galaxy. We have learned that hope is the most powerful weapon of all. In the back of the hall, former Zephyrian officers sat with their old enemies, working together to plan the liberation of more worlds. The Empire still controlled many systems, but their grip was weakening every day. Captain Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, looked out the window at the space around Cathara. Where once there had been a Zephyrian blockade, now there was a fleet of ships from dozens of species, all flying the flag of the Liberation Alliance. The flag was simple, a blue background with a single white star surrounded by a circle of smaller stars. The blue represented the peace they were fighting for. The white star in the center represented humanity, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they had been willing to stand up first. The circle of smaller stars represented every species that had found the courage to join them. Morrison smiled as he watched the mixed fleet patrol the system. Human ships flew alongside Cathara biovessels, Veltar stealth ships, and even former Zephyrian cruisers. They were all different, but they were all united by the same belief. Freedom was worth fighting for. Hope was stronger than fear. And sometimes the smallest act of courage could change the entire galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled for 1,000 years by making the galaxy afraid. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had never counted on humanity. They had never met a species that would fight not for conquest, but for the simple belief that no one should have to face their darkest hour alone. The war was not over. There were still worlds to free, still people to save. But the galaxy had learned something important. The Empire could be beaten, hope could triumph over fear, and as long as the Zaltharian monitoring station hung in space like a metal spider. Its sensors reached out across the darkness, watching for any ships that might threaten the Empire. Sensor operator Vex High sat at his post, bored and tired. Nothing interesting ever happened at Station ZX7. It was just another quiet day watching empty space. Then his screen started going crazy. Vex High stared at the readings and shook his head. The sensors were showing impossible numbers. Hundreds of ships were coming out of quantum space, maybe even thousands. But that could not be right. The sensors had to be broken. No one had that many ships except the Zaltharian Empire itself. He called his commander over to look at the screens. Commander Kralthos was an old soldier who had seen many battles. He looked at the sensor readings and laughed. The primitive humans from Earth were supposed to be in this area of space. Maybe their few little ships were causing some kind of interference with the sensors. Then 2,000 human warships appeared in space around the station. Kralthos stopped laughing. He had never seen so many ships in one place before. They were arranged in perfect formation, moving like they had practiced this maneuver 1,000 times. Each ship was different from the others, but they all had the same deadly look. These were not exploration vessels or cargo ships. These were weapons built for war. Admiral Morrison opened a communication channel to the Zaltharian station. He had learned their language during the 3-year journey from Earth. His words were clear and simple. He told the aliens that the United Earth Fleet had arrived. He said the Zaltharians had threatened his homeworld. Now they would pay the price for that mistake. The Admiral gave the aliens one chance to surrender. If they gave up now, they would be treated well. Human laws protected prisoners of war. But if they chose to fight, they would see why humanity had never been conquered by anyone. Commander Kralthos could not believe what he was hearing. These primitive creatures were threatening him. They were demanding that he surrender to them. It was the most ridiculous thing he had ever heard. His station had enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. These humans were about to learn what Zaltharian weapons could do. The commander activated all of his defensive systems. Plasma cannons swiveled toward the human ships. Missile launchers loaded their deadliest warheads. Fighter squadrons launched from the station's bays. Kralthos was going to teach these humans a lesson they would never forget. The Zaltharian weapons opened fire first. Bright beams of energy shot across space toward the human fleet. Missiles streaked through the darkness, their warheads ready to tear ships apart. The fighter planes moved to attack positions, their pilots confident of easy victory. Captain Ryan Hughes watched the enemy fire coming toward his ship. The Vengeance had the best shields that human science could build. Dr. Sullivan had worked for 2 years to perfect the adaptive shielding system. Now they would see if her work could save human lives. The Zaltharian plasma beams hit the human ships and did nothing. The energy just bounced off the shields like raindrops hitting a window. The missiles exploded against the shield barriers without causing any damage. The alien fighters found themselves flying into a wall of defensive fire that destroyed them before they could attack. Hughes smiled and gave the order to return fire. The Vengeance and her sister ships had been built for this moment. Human engineers had studied Zaltharian technology for 3 years. They knew exactly where to hit to, cause the most damage. Railguns fired tungsten bullets faster than anything the aliens had ever seen. The metal projectiles punched through Zaltharian armor like it was made of paper. Particle beam weapons carved glowing lines across enemy hull plates. Missile swarms overwhelmed the station's defensive systems and exploded deep inside its structure. Commander. Kralthos watched in horror as his weapons proved useless against the human ships. His station was the strongest in this sector of space. It should have been able to fight off a dozen enemy vessels, but these humans had brought 2,000 ships, and every one of them was more advanced than anything in the Zaltharian fleet. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, Station ZX-7 was a cloud of burning debris floating through space. A few pieces of wreckage tumbled away from the explosion, but most of the station had been completely destroyed. The humans had not lost a single ship. Admiral Morrison ordered the fleet to continue deeper into alien territory. Behind them, automated message buoys spread out through space. Any Zaltharian ship that came to investigate the destroyed station would receive a simple warning. Humanity was coming to end the Empire. Any aliens who wanted to live should run away and never come back. Dr. Sullivan monitored the fleet's performance from her position on the Liberty. All of her systems were working perfectly. The human ships were faster, stronger, and better armed than the aliens had expected. 3 years of preparation were paying off in ways that made her proud to be human. The Zaltharians had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years by being stronger than everyone else. They had conquered world after world because no one could match their technology or their firepower. But they had never faced humans before. They had never fought an enemy that got smarter and stronger every time someone tried to hurt them. Commander Martinez reviewed the battle recordings with her tactical team. The Zaltharian weapons were powerful but poorly designed. Their ships looked impressive but had weak armor in critical areas. Their tactics were based on intimidation rather than skill. The aliens had gotten lazy after centuries of easy victories. Humans had learned to fight through necessity. Every war on Earth had taught them new lessons about combat. Every battle had made them better at finding ways to win against superior forces. Now all of that knowledge was being put to use against an enemy that had no idea what real war looked like. The human fleet moved on through space, leaving the wreckage of the monitoring station behind them. Other Zaltharian installations were waiting ahead. Military bases, supply depots, and command centers that had never been attacked before. The aliens were about to discover that their empire was not as safe as they had believed. Admiral Morrison looked at the star charts and planned the next phase of the campaign. Earth had sent its children to war, and those children were proving themselves worthy of their heritage. The galaxy was about to change forever, and humanity would be the force that changed it. The first shot of the war had been fired, and the aliens had missed. Now it was humanity's turn to show what they could do when someone threatened their home. The Zaltharian Empire's days of easy conquest were over. The real war was just beginning. Emperor Zalthek sat on his golden throne in the heart of the Empire's capital world. The throne room was huge and filled with the treasures of 1,000 conquered planets. Alien advisors and military commanders stood in neat rows before him, waiting for his orders. For 1,000 years, this room had been the center of galactic power. Today, the Emperor was angry. The report from Station ZX-7 made no sense. How could a monitoring station with enough firepower to destroy a small moon be wiped out in 4 minutes? The humans were supposed to be primitive creatures with crude technology. They should not have been able to scratch the station's armor. let alone destroy it completely. But the evidence was clear. The station was gone. Every ship and every person on it had been killed. Worse, the humans had left message buoys warning other Zaltharian forces to stay away. No one had ever dared to threaten the Empire like this before. Emperor Zalthek called for Admiral Vorthak, commander of the 5th Battle Fleet. The admiral was one of the Empire's best military leaders. He had conquered 12 worlds for the Emperor and had never lost a single battle. If anyone could crush these upstart humans, it would be him. Admiral Vorthak bowed before the Golden Throne. He was a proud warrior who had served the Empire his entire life. The idea that primitive humans had destroyed a Zaltharian station seemed impossible to him. There had to be some mistake in the reports. Maybe the station had suffered an accident or been attacked by rebels from one of the conquered worlds. The Emperor gave his orders. Admiral Vorthak would take 300 of the Empire's most powerful warships and hunt down the human fleet. He would capture their leaders and bring them back to the capital world in chains. The galaxy needed to see what happened to anyone who dared challenge Zaltharian power. Admiral Vorthak saluted and left to prepare his fleet. 300 ships was enough firepower to conquer a dozen star systems. It was far more than needed to deal with whatever primitive vessels the humans might have. This would be an easy victory that would restore the Empire's reputation. Meanwhile, Admiral Morrison was leading the human fleet deeper into alien territory. His ships had split into several groups to attack different targets at the same time. The main fleet under his command was heading for the Kethvar system, where intelligence reports said the aliens had major mining operations. Captain Hughes was excited about the coming battle. The Vengeance and her sister ships had performed perfectly at the monitoring station. Human weapons and shields were proving to be far superior to anything the aliens had. The next engagement would be a real test of their capabilities against a larger enemy force. The two fleets met near a large gas giant with rings of ice and rock around it. Zaltharian mining platforms floated among the rings, harvesting valuable gases and rare metals. It was an important system for the Empire's war machine, which made it a perfect target for the human attack. Admiral Vorthak was confident as his ships moved into battle formation. His 300 vessels were the pride of the Zaltharian fleet. Each ship was the size of a small city and carried enough weapons to level continents. The human fleet looked tiny in comparison. The admiral opened a communication channel to the human ships. He expected to see primitive creatures cowering in fear when they saw the might of the Empire. Instead, he found himself looking at Admiral Morrison, who appeared calm and ready for battle. Morrison spoke in perfect Zaltharian, which surprised the alien commander. The human admiral thanked Vorthak for bringing so many ships to be destroyed. He said it would save humanity the trouble of hunting them down one by one. Then he closed the channel and gave the order to attack. Admiral Vorthak was shocked by the humans' confidence. No enemy had ever spoken to him like that before. He decided to teach these creatures some respect. His ships opened fire with every weapon they had, filling space with deadly energy beams and explosive missiles. The human fleet moved in a pattern that Vorthak had never seen before. Instead of flying in straight lines like most species did, they formed a sphere that could attack in all directions at once. Fast attack ships darted around the edges while heavy battleships held the center. It was like fighting a ball of angry wasps. Commander Martinez led the fast attack squadrons in flanking moves around the Zaltharian fleet. Her ships were smaller than the enemy vessels, but much faster and more agile. They could strike at weak points and then disappear before the aliens could target them effectively. The Zaltharian return fire was powerful, but poorly aimed. Their gunners were used to fighting enemies who flew in predictable patterns. The human ships moved like dancers, never staying in one place long enough to be hit. When the alien shots did connect, they bounced harmlessly off the adaptive shields. Dr. Sullivan watched the battle from her command center on the Liberty. Her innovations were giving humanity a huge advantage. The alien weapons were designed to overwhelm enemy defenses through brute force. They had never faced shields that could adapt and change to stop different types of attacks. Human weapons were proving devastatingly effective against Zaltharian ships. The aliens had built their vessels to look impressive and intimidating. Form had been more important than function in their designs. Human engineers had focused purely on making ships that could fight and win battles. Railgun projectiles punched through alien armor like bullets through cardboard. Particle beams sliced off weapon turrets and engine sections with surgical precision. Missile swarms found every weak spot in the enemy hulls and exploited them ruthlessly. The Zaltharian ships were falling apart under the assault. Admiral Vorth-Ak watched in growing panic as his fleet was systematically destroyed. His ships were supposed to be invincible. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years because no one could match their military might. How were these primitive humans making his weapons look like toys? The battle turned into a rout as more and more Zaltharian ships were destroyed or disabled. Some alien captains tried to surrender, but their communications were jammed by human, electronic warfare systems. Others attempted to flee, but the fast attack squadrons cut off their escape routes with precision strikes. When the shooting finally stopped, only a handful of Zaltharian vessels remained intact. Admiral Morrison had deliberately allowed some ships to escape so they could report back to their empire. He wanted the aliens to know exactly what had happened here. He wanted them to understand that humanity was coming for them. Admiral Vorth-Ak's flagship was one of the ships that escaped. His bridge was damaged and half his crew was dead, but he was alive to carry the terrible news back to the Emperor. The humans had destroyed 2/3 of the 5th Battle Fleet in less than 2 hours. It was the worst defeat in Zaltharian history. The mining platforms in the Kethvar system surrendered without a fight after seeing what happened to the fleet. The alien workers, mostly slaves from conquered worlds, welcomed their human liberators with joy. They had been waiting for someone strong enough to challenge the Empire for centuries. Admiral Morrison established temporary governments on the liberated worlds and then moved on to his next target. The human fleet was splitting into smaller groups to attack multiple systems at once. Every victory made it clear that the age of Zaltharian dominance was ending. Back on the capital world, Emperor Zalthek listened to Admiral Vorth-Ak's report with growing dread. If the humans could destroy his best fleet so easily, what hope did the Empire have? For the first time in his long reign, the Emperor felt real fear. The massive throne room fell silent as Admiral Vorth-Ak finished his report. Emperor Zalthek stared at the damaged military commander, trying to understand what he had just heard. The 5th Battle Fleet had been the pride of the Zaltharian military. 300 of their best ships, commanded by their most experienced admiral, had been destroyed by primitive humans in less than 2 hours. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. But the evidence was right there in front of him. Vorth-Ak's uniform was burned and torn. His face was scarred from flying debris when his flagship's bridge had been hit. The few ships that had escaped were limping back to port with massive damage. The humans had not just won the battle. They had crushed the Zaltharian fleet like it was made of paper. The Emperor's advisors whispered among themselves, their voices filled with fear. For 1,000 years, the Zaltharian Empire had been the strongest force in the galaxy. No one had ever successfully challenged their military might. Entire species had surrendered without firing a shot when they saw the Empire's ships approaching their worlds. Now everything had changed. The humans were not just another weak species to be conquered. They were something new and terrifying. They had technology that made Zaltharian weapons look like primitive tools. They had tactics that turned the Empire's greatest strengths into weaknesses. Reports were flooding in from across the Empire as human task forces struck at military bases and supply centers. Admiral Morrison had split his fleet into smaller groups that could attack multiple targets at the same time. Each group was commanded by experienced human officers who understood how to fight and win battles. Captain Hughes was leading attacks on weapons factories in the outer systems. His ships moved like hunting wolves, striking fast and hard before disappearing into space. The Zaltharian defenders never knew where the next attack would come from. Their heavy, slow ships could not catch the agile human vessels. Commander Martinez had taken her squadrons to the slave worlds where the Empire kept its captured populations. The aliens had made millions of beings work in mines and factories to support their war machine. Now those same slaves were being freed by human forces who treated them with dignity and respect. Dr. Sullivan was coordinating the technical teams that were studying captured Zaltharian equipment. Every piece of alien technology that fell into human hands was taken apart and analyzed. The humans were learning how Empire systems worked and finding new ways to defeat them. The Zaltharian military found itself fighting an enemy unlike anything they had faced before. Humans did not just want to conquer territory or steal resources. They wanted to completely destroy the Empire's ability to oppress other species. They were systematically taking apart the infrastructure that had kept the aliens in power for centuries. On the industrial world of Krevtos, human forces captured the main shipyard where Zaltharian warships were built. Instead of just destroying the facility, they converted it to produce medical supplies and farming equipment for the liberated worlds. The same factories that had built instruments of war were now making tools of peace. The communications networks that the Empire used to control their territory were being turned against them. Human technical experts had learned how to intercept and decode Zaltharian messages. They knew where enemy fleets were moving and what orders had been given to defend. Important targets. Emperor Zalthek tried to rally his remaining forces for a final stand. He ordered every available ship to converge on the capital system for the defense of the homeworld. If the humans wanted to destroy the Empire, they would have to fight their way through every weapon the Zaltharians possessed. But his commanders were reporting problems everywhere. Ships that should have arrived for the defense were missing or destroyed. Supply convoys were being intercepted by human raiders. Weapons factories were in rebel hands or had been reduced to smoking ruins. The Empire's military machine was falling apart faster than anyone could fix it. The freed slave worlds were not just sitting quietly after their liberation. Many species that had been conquered by the Zaltharians were now fighting back with weapons and ships provided by human forces. The galaxy was rising up against their oppressors, and humanity was leading the rebellion. Admiral Morrison received regular reports from his task force commanders as they completed their missions. Each victory brought them closer to the final objective. The Zaltharian capital world was heavily defended, but the Empire's ability to support those defenses was being destroyed piece by piece. The human fleet had taken surprisingly few casualties during their campaign. Zaltharian weapons were powerful, but designed for fighting enemies who used similar tactics. Human ships moved and fought in ways that the aliens could not predict or counter effectively. Every engagement demonstrated the superiority of human military science. Commander Martinez stood on the bridge of her ship as it approached another liberated world. The local population had built statues honoring their human liberators in the few weeks since they had been freed. Children who had never known freedom were playing in parks that had once been military compounds. The psychological effect of the human victories was spreading throughout the galaxy. Species that had been too afraid to resist the Empire were now finding the courage to fight back. Pirates and rebels who had been hiding in remote systems were joining the human cause. The Zaltharian Empire was being attacked from all directions at once. Dr. Sullivan completed her analysis of captured Zaltharian computer systems and smiled at what she found. The aliens had become so dependent on their technology that they had forgotten how to adapt when it failed. Human engineers could modify their equipment in the field, but the aliens needed specialized facilities that were now in enemy hands. Emperor Zalthek sat alone in his throne room as the last reports came in from the outer systems. His empire was gone. The military that had conquered 47 worlds was defeated. The industrial base that had supported 1,000 years of expansion was destroyed or in rebel hands. All that remained was the capital system and whatever ships could make it there for the final battle. The Emperor had one last card to play. Hidden deep beneath his palace was a weapon that could destroy an entire star system. It had been built as a final deterrent against any force that might threaten the Empire's survival. If he could not rule the galaxy, then perhaps no one should be allowed to have it. But even that plan was complicated by the human approach to warfare. Other species would have come straight for the capital world, giving him time to prepare his ultimate weapon. The humans were taking time to free every enslaved population and capture every important facility. They were not just winning the war. They were building a better galaxy to replace the empire they were destroying. Admiral Morrison reviewed the strategic situation and prepared for the final phase of the campaign. The Zaltharian Empire was finished as a military threat, but the capital world still had to be taken. That was where the real test would come. Emperor Zalthek would not give up his throne without using every weapon at his disposal. The human fleet began to gather for the assault on the Zaltharian homeworld. Ships that had been attacking targets across the galaxy converged on the capital system. It was time to end the Empire once and for all and free the last worlds still under alien control. The galaxy held its breath as humanity prepared for the final battle. The outcome would determine whether freedom or tyranny would rule the stars for the next 1,000 years.